Welcome back, RotoGrinders, to the Best Ball Hot Take Show presented by Underdog Fantasy. I'm your host, Dean, joined today by two of the best minds when it comes to playing best ball. How about that? Batting first, leading off, the hardest working man here at RotoGrinders. If you like what we do, behind the scenes, he's got his hands pretty much in everything. Former XFL guru, potential XFL guru in the future, we shall see, thanks to The Rock. What's up, Gimino?
Oh, you know, Dean, it's getting there. We're almost there. We're getting the training camp reports coming up on my alerts now. I'm finding out who looks good. Who's got the chemistry, Dean? I'm finding it out right now on my Twitter alerts at this very moment.
I'm going to say, spoiler alert, everybody's in the best shape of their life. Is that what we're getting at again? As far as, or not necessarily?
It's amazing. It's amazing the rapport that's being built, Dean. There's rapport all over the place.
We have done a bunch of these shows. What we're doing is we basically focus on 4 or 5 teams, depending on if you don't see your team, go back into the archives. We bring in other teams into the conversation as far as this guy versus that guy, but we're focusing mainly today on the Bears, the Saints, Pittsburgh, and Indianapolis. I'm also going to be I'm going to give you some this guy or that guy, or even some 3 guys. You got to kind of rank those. We'll talk about that in the middle of the show. Also, we're going to bring in Beermakersfan, Chris Prince. What's up, Beer? How are things in your world?
I'm good. So, yeah, these training camp reports definitely got some movement going on under the desk. But A.J. Dillon apparently is Saquon Barkley. So if you didn't know, now you know. So that's the breaking news here.
Well, there you go. This is the hot take show, and I guess that will qualify as a hot take, I suppose.
We're bringing it, baby. No, I'm totally kidding here. I think A.J. Dillon is garbage, but by the size of those quads, everybody's excited about him.
I did see that picture.
If I have to hear one more thing about Antonio Gibson, I swear, it's just, you would think just get him in the hall the way people are talking about what's going on in Washington.
Christian McCaffrey part 2, baby.
Beer, do you like the quads of Dillon or Eckler's just like shirtless pictures? Because those have been impressive as well.
All the above. Give me all the quads, the shirtless pics, the DK Metcalf looking like RoboCop last season. I'm here for all of it, Dean.
We said this is the Best Ball Hot Take Show presented by Underdog Fantasy. What is Underdog Fantasy? They specialize in best ball, set it and forget it format, the best part of football. You could say it's fab and stuff like that and weekly changes. That's not for me. That's for the birds. I will dabble in it with my friends, but whatever. But time is a commodity. And, I got bronchitis. I have no time for that. I don't have time to make these weekly changes. I want to set it and forget it, Rob Appeal style. Go to underdogfantasy.com. Now you can have leagues, depending on your buy-in, whatever you're comfortable with, between $3 and $100, including the Best Ball Mania Tournament, 25 SMACkers. You can turn $25 into $200K. If you think that $1 million is a total prize pool. If you don't want to buy in for $25, 1/5 of that, buy in for $5. There's a $100,000 prize pool, and there's $20,000 at the top. UnderdogFantasy.com. You can get it on the computer, on the laptop. That's where I do it. I'm not really an app guy, but they do have apps. If you want to, you can play, you can draft on the go while you're waiting in line. Who knows what you're up to? You can do some drafting. I'm sure you guys have drafted in some weird spots. Get it there as far as iOS and Android. UnderdogFantasy.com. All right, first team on the docket, the Bears. Gimino, open up the Bears for us. Are we enthused about Chicago? Is Gimino with us?
I guess that's a no. Silence speaks volumes here.
Sorry there, Dean. You cut out on me for a second there. Look, let's start off with the Bears and talk about the quarterback situation, because I think that's a big thing hanging over the head of this team right now is who is going to play starting quarterback for the team. Right now, there's not being a lot positive said about Mitchell Trubisky. We've seen over the last couple of years him struggle to gain command of the room, to really gain the love and adoration of the coaching staff, the fans, and basically anyone who's watching these games. You watch Patrick Mahomes and the guys that got drafted after him in the draft, and people are just love to shoot these comparisons out, and rightfully so. I just don't think that they believe that Trubisky is going to be the guy there for the future. One of the reasons why they brought someone like Nick Foles in to make sure that they had another option for the season. I do believe that it will be Foles that will end up getting the reins, knows the playbook over there, and quite frankly has proven that he can lead the team to the promised land by winning the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. Albeit anytime he seems to leave Philadelphia, he stinks, but maybe this will be the exception to the rule. Maybe we'll see Nick Foles actually produce in some place that is not green and in the city of brotherly love. So I'm looking at Foles as the potential starter here, and I would expect that if you're trying to take a stab in best balls and who will be the starter, it would be Foles at this present time.
Beer, you have a thought on that? I mean, ideally, you probably want neither, but I guess as a last pick flyer, you're sort of picking one. You have no quarterbacks left. Foles or Trubisky, and depending on who it is, how does that affect the rest of the team?
It's Foles, but I don't really want either of them because I could see a scenario where Foles doesn't play well. They go back to Trubisky, vice versa. Maybe Trubisky surprises us and he's the starter. So if you draft the wrong guy, you're held holding the bucket there and you don't have that quarterback spot filled. So I don't think either give you a massive upside where I feel like I'm missing out if I don't take Nick Foles. I'm not leaving a draft saying, damn, I didn't get Nick Foles. You're never going to hear me or probably anybody but Nick Foles' mom say that. So I just don't see the need to go here. If you're building a stack, sure, the target distribution going to be very, very limited here in this offense. So it's appealing in that sense. But other than that, I really don't care about either of these guys.
Does that affect Allen Robinson to any degree for you, or it's basically like neither one's particularly great?
I love him regardless. I don't think it really matters. Foles is probably the upgrade just because he's going to be more accurate and the better pocket passer. So in that sense, he gets an upgrade with Foles in there. But he's done well without Foles. He's done well his entire career without a quarterback. So if he does get serviceable level quarterback play, which we think Foles can offer, I think the sky's the limit for Allen Robinson. I'm higher on him than maybe anybody this season.
Wow. So I'm seeing what I'm looking at as far as ADP, like early fourth. Is that about right for you?
I'll take him well before that. I have him inside my top 10 receivers. So, once you hammer away at those first couple rounds of running backs, I think round 3 is a perfectly suitable spot for Allen Robinson. If he happens to fall to round 4, that's like a gift just waiting that you need to gobble up. And the people you're drafting with clearly don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, Gimino, I'm seeing around 33 overall, give or take. Is that about right for you, or are you with Beer as well and you want to pounce on him earlier than that?
I mean, I'll definitely take him on the 2-3 turn. If I'm taking a wide receiver there at the beginning of round number 3, I'm certainly willing to do so. He's one of my favorites as well, and I think it has to do with the shape of that outcome curve. You know that there's probably not going to be a lot of seasons that you'll draft from Robinson in which he just completely plummets and fails. I mean, he's going to get the majority of workload in this offense. And at the same time, you could see a potential ceiling here where he could be one of the 4 or 5 best receivers in fantasy football. So I'm interested in Allen Robinson early on in these drafts, and I'm trying to take him because I do think the ownership will be a little bit lower. I mean, I guess maybe a little bit different roster construction if you take him a little bit before other people. That's not going to make a big difference. I don't know why I mentioned that. I think it's more about the floor ceiling combination for me where I like Robinson. Let
me ask you this strategy question, Beer. People love the stack, and there's 100 reasons why you're supposed to stack when making best ball lineups. Is it possible that he's falling a little bit, Robinson, because people are afraid, like, who do I pair him with? Who do I stack him with? I don't want to be stuck with the quarterback. And sure, you can have him on la carte, but is that possibly a reason why people are staying away, or I'm just throwing it out there?
I just think he's undervalued. I think looking at this team all in all, it's unsexy. The quarterback position is in flux. It doesn't stand out as some of the other receivers in that range who have maybe a bigger name, a higher profile. They're younger. There's a lot of reasons that he kind of goes overlooked, but he's always perpetually underrated each and every season. This year's no different. Coming off the massive year, a ton of targets. I just don't see that changing, but your question is valid. I mean, it's the same thing I talked about with the quarterback position. If people aren't sure who it's going to be, do I want to sink a pick into Nick Foles or Trubisky and not knowing they'll be the guy for 16 weeks? It could certainly be a part of it. We know people are getting more and more into the stacking, and that's all people are hearing about with best ball. So, a year or 2 years ago when draft started, people weren't as hip to the idea, but now you got a lot of DFS players, a lot of season-long guys even stacking on their season-long teams. It's something that everybody's looking to do and should do, especially in these big contests.
Hey, I'm tuning into this show. I'm not exactly 100% sure what best ball is. Explain the concept of stacking and why it's advantageous.
So stacking is basically grabbing multiple pieces of an offense, and you see it. If you play DFS, you should be doing it in baseball. I know you guys love some hockey. You guys were talking hockey pre-show, so you want to stack you some lines in hockey. Even NBA, it's viable in some of these game stacks. But in football, these guys correlate so well together, especially a quarterback and his pass catchers. I mean, think about it. Guy throws a touchdown pass, Foles to Allen Robinson, boom, I'm getting double the points there on both of those guys. So it's something that you definitely want to take advantage of. I like to do it more with better offenses than the Bears, but sometimes you can stack these teams a lot cheaper, and it doesn't just always have to be quarterback, receiver. It can be tight end. It could be a running back like Tariq Cohen, who I think would fit in any kind of Bears stack as well in a PPR format. But just grabbing 2, 3, sometimes 4 pieces if the offense is good enough, and really hoping to stack up some big 25, 30, 35-point games from these teams, especially towards the end of the season.
All right, I'm going to throw some wide receivers your guys' way. Stop me when you will take that person over Robinson. Thielen, Beckham, DJ Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster.
I'll take Juju over him.
Gimino?
Nope, I got Robinson ahead of him.
Fight! This is where we fight, guys.
Well, come on, Dean. You're talking. If you're really fighting about like Robinson, Godwin, Smith-Schuster, Beckham. I mean, those guys are all going to be like pick your poison. If you're making a lot of teams, you get a little piece of some of them. I happen to have probably going to be the most Robinson of those guys, but I do like the difference in the grand scheme isn't going to be that big. So having a big fight about it is a waste of time.
Fair enough, but it's fun to watch.
He squashed your fight. I mean, I'm with him. I mean, there's kind of a giant group of receivers. To me, after the big 3, and I'm going to include Julio Jones, I have him number 3 with Adams and Thomas. Then there's just a giant group of guys from Godwin and Evans and Hopkins and all the names you just said, Tyreek Hill, Galladay even. He's probably the next tier. But so there's a group of about 8 that I'm happy with any of them, and you can make the case for why I have Juju ahead of Allen Robinson or DJ Moore ahead of this guy. The fact is you should be using tiers, and I'm perfectly fine with any of these guys, even being my wide receiver 1. I go running back heavy in a draft. I land in this range. I am perfectly happy with any of these guys leading my receiving core. Let's
just finish this game with you, Beer, because I heard what you just said, but you're talking about tiers, which obviously makes a lot of sense. But you said you're higher on Robinson than pretty much anybody you know. Just want to keep going. Mike Evans?
Robinson.
Cooper?
Robinson by far.
Galladay?
Robinson.
Godwin?
Godwin, but it's closer than most. I'm kind of getting nervous on Godwin a little bit, so sliding him down, and Robinson I really haven't moved much.
All right, let's talk about the running backs. Gimino, sort through it. Montgomery, Cohen more the PPR guy. Are they going about the right spot, too high, too low? Are they some of these people you're seeking out or what?
Well, don't forget Cordell Patterson, because they're going to line him up as a running back this year as well, probably. So, you've got, look, you're going to see mostly Montgomery in there on early downs. The concern with a guy like Montgomery is like how much passing game work is he going to be able to get when you have dedicated, specialist backs that are working alongside of him. He's definitely a good runner. He's got the potential to be a yards after contact guy who doesn't go down easily, a guy who could probably get in the box if he gets enough opportunity down in that area of the field. But I just think that he's a relatively unsexy option for these best ball formats, in the sense that you're probably never going to see outcomes where he's one of the top 5 backs. I just feel like without the receiving upside, especially in full point PPR formats, Underdog Fantasy half point PPR is a little bit more viable there. But I don't think you're going to have the upside there with David Montgomery, and that's why I don't tend to find myself going for him very often.
Here,
he's one of those guys. Say I go 2 running backs early, I come back with 2 receivers in rounds 3 and 4, which we said is already loaded up. If I want to grab another running back before it dries up, he's in the conversation for me. And I agree with a lot of what Gimino says. Tariq Cohen is a fantastic pass catcher out of the backfield, but he did catch 25 balls last season. We're expecting this offense to be somewhat better. Almost ran for 1,000 yards, and a lot of people like he was garbage. Yeah, he wasn't sexy, but if a guy in a rookie season is getting me 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, caught one as well, that's intriguing to me as an RB3. If he's my RB2, I don't feel great about it, but an RB3, I think there's decent depth there. So you definitely question the upside. So in a huge tournament, maybe I'm not as excited, but in a standard 12 team, you're drafting with your buddies, I think he's a perfectly fine running back 3.
Gimino, any of these 17 tight ends do anything for you? Old man, Jimmy Graham. Historically, people would say like Ted Ginn, wide receiver, is like, well, that's a good guy for best ball because he has those 3 or 4 weeks. I guess you can make that argument. You guys tell me if you're interested in him. It's kind of a flyer to some extent. Again, a weak offense to be a part of, but he will have those explosive weeks on occasion. Tight ends, the fringe receivers, anything here for you, Gimino?
No, we talked about like some of these guys I would take as part of stacks normally if I'm trying to make a best ball tournament roster, but we're not really that interested in the Bear stack right now. We don't really know who the quarterback is for sure. Even if we did, are we really all that excited, to get, shares of Anthony Miller in there? I mean, I do like Anthony Miller a little bit. I mean, I think he's a player who could have probably his best season as a pro yet. I think there's, some upside for him as a player to become somebody who's valuable in fantasy, at least more viable than he has been. He's had some injuries to deal with to start his career. But the tight ends, Jimmy Graham, Cole Kmet. I mean, we're not really diving in here full steam ahead. I think the best thing I could say about them is that they'll be completely unowned if you're trying to play in like this $1 million contest on one of these other sites. So the $500,000 best ball championship on Underdog, you might be able to find some reason to like say your opponents aren't going to have him weeks 14, 15, 16. But I can't really endorse it.
Yeah, Beer, you got anything here? Is anything worth talking about as far as these guys?
The tight ends I'm out on. I mean, Cole Kmet's a guy I think eventually can get there, but we know rookie tight ends, it can take 2-3 seasons. So I don't see him breaking the mold and coming in and being Gronk and making a year one impact, especially with Graham there. I mean, if anything, these guys are going to split snaps and targets and just a mess. I do like Anthony Miller probably more than Gimino. Doesn't even need to be part of a stack. I think he's undervalued big time right now. This is a guy that just hasn't been able to stay healthy, but when he has, he's been very productive. We saw some big games out of him. Foles loves to throw to slot receivers, so that's in his favor. He's a touchdown maker going all the way back to his days in college. So I think there's a lot of upside with Anthony Miller, and there's no other receiver besides Allen Robinson. So it's not a team where you're, a Denver where you got a bunch of guys or Dallas where you're competing with a bunch of teams. And I know they're not going to be on that level offensively as Dallas. The point is the target distribution is what's important here. And if he can stay on the field, I think Anthony Miller can easily outproduce these costs.
All right, Beer, let's open up the Saints. 2 first-round picks for the Saints are seeing right now as far as ADP. Kamara going at 4, Michael Thomas going at 7. Is that about right for you? Do you go into the draft if you're in that area with I want a running back, I want a receiver, or it's just like what the draft gives you and you got to be able to adjust on the fly?
Yeah, I have Kamara at 5. I moved Alvin Cook ahead of him. So that's again, I don't think you're going to get a huge argument out of many people, 4, 5, 6. It just depends on how you feel about his rushing share. We know he's going to be involved in the passing game. How involved is he going to be on the ground, I think is important. Can those touchdowns come back? We saw a big dip in his touchdowns. As far as Michael Thomas, I love Michael Thomas. I just have a hard time drafting a receiver in the first round in a lot of my builds. And right away, you're against the 8 ball trying to stack the Saints because you're not going to get both of these guys. So you have to make that decision really early on in draft. You almost have to go into the draft saying, I'm going to stack the Saints and then decide which piece is it going to be. And if it's a mid-round pick, you're probably better off going with Thomas there. But most of my drafts, Dean, I'm looking for running backs early. It makes it very hard to pull the trigger on Michael Thomas, especially with the depth of the receiver position in that round 3-4 range. You're just really behind the 8 ball if you go wide receiver early and then try to make up for it at running back.
This is the hot take show. I'm guessing, though, what kind of hot takes you're going to have? Like Kamara is about right, 4 or 5. Thomas is about right at 7 or 8. Do you also, thoughts on that? If you feel free to expand on it, but I think that's probably what it should be. That's your spot. That's who's left. That's who you got to take. And as far as like, I want to pick a running back or a receiver in the first round, and that's that. Is that something that you go into with that plan and like you just don't want to hedge, or how does that work?
Look, I'm going to preface this by I know how this is going to sound, but I think Michael Thomas is a terrible fantasy pick in this particular season because of the way that roster construction works. I don't think he's going to be terrible as a producer. I think he's going to be fantastic again. But when you look at the kind of running back situations that are out there with more and more, ambiguous / split duty situations that are on the marketplace right now, you find yourself building rosters where you're going to be hit and miss week to week with your round 4, 5, 6, 7 running backs. It feels like a sort of a vacuum of great options. Unless you think Ronald Jones is going to like just completely surpass all expectations by a lot this season, unless you're really feeling like, for whatever reason, Devin Singletary is going to suddenly get the majority of the role. These are the kind of guys that we're looking at in those mid rounds, and the kind of guys you're probably going to be looking at if you take a guy like Michael Thomas in the first round. And I just prefer to have some of those fantastic wide receiver options that we're seeing in that exact same range, firing at my best ball lineups throughout the weeks. So I think it's a pretty hot take to say that I probably won't have much Michael Thomas at all. And it's not because I don't think he's a good player, just because I think the roster construction kind of becomes difficult if you go wide receiver there.
You like the depth at receiver when you like the depth at running back, and that's that.
Yeah, that's a lot shorter way to say it, Dean.
That's a simplifying way of saying it.
I like to say a lot of words.
Let's see how much you hate Michael Thomas. And again, I understand exactly what you're saying. How much you think he's amazing, but opportunity cost, yada, yada, yada. Would you rather – you can only pick one of these two guys, Joe Mixon or Michael Thomas?
I've taken Joe Mixon just about every time so far.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Kenyon Drake?
I will usually take Drake.
Beer?
Same. And
okay.
I would love to say I hate Michael Thomas, but I agree with Gimino. It's more of a build type scenario. And, we've talked about the Terry McLaurins, the DJ Charks, the DK Metcalfs, the Calvin Ridleys, and that's that group of receivers. That's that second wave of receivers that you're going to miss out on when you go Thomas. Then you're struggling at running back, and then you end up with David Montgomery as your RB1 or 2. And I just don't see that as being a very productive or a build that's going to make you a lot of money in some of these tournaments. So I have Thomas ranked higher, but I would gladly go Drake over Thomas there. I'm with Gimino. I just don't see taking Michael Thomas in the first round being the optimal build unless you are dead set on either a stack or I'm just going to go 0 RB, load up on receiver early to be different, and take my shot at 5, 6, 7 running backs later in the draft. Outside of those scenarios, I don't think it makes any sense to go Michael Thomas.
Do you find yourself grabbing Breeze? Looks like he's about what I'm seeing, 118 overall as far as the ADP. Is that about right for you?
Yeah, it sounds about right. I have him at QB 10, kind of in that Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan kind of group. So I tend to look for guys with a little more upside with their legs. So I mean, like a Carson Wentz to me, a much better option than Breeze, or I'll wait and kind of grab guys a little bit later. So Breeze is another guy. If he falls far enough, I'm interested, but he's not a target, not a guy I'm circling on my cheat sheets.
Yeah, I know you guys liked on a previous show, Roethlisberger. You can get him a couple rounds later, I would imagine, right? Is that something you'd prefer?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Your thoughts, Gimino?
I have Drew Brees on my avoid list for the season. I have him way down there, QB 16. I think the situation that we're going to see in New Orleans this year, I think they're going to win a lot of games. I think they're going to be playing with the lead. I think that they're going to be at the end of games, not necessarily relying on Drew Brees to be racking up 300+ yard games and big, massive output games. I think they've got a lot of different diverse ways to move the football. They've got Taysom Hill in there. He's an aging player. I'm not saying what we're seeing by any means, a Drew Brees who can't play football anymore, but the deep shot is no longer as big part of his game. They throw a lot of short routes. If a lot of the rushing touchdowns we talked about Kamara not getting, let's say if he gets them, or if it's Latavius Murray or Taysom, who I mentioned, I think that Drew Brees has. I guess I don't see that there's a big ceiling for him. I just think I can do better with other quarterbacks.
Is Hill the quarterback in New Orleans in a couple of years? Is that the plan, Gimino?
Well, they got Mr. Finger Eater, Jameis Winston in there now, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, they only signed him to a 1-year deal, right? I think. I'm pretty sure. Winston? I could be wrong.
That was a 1-year deal. I'm pretty sure their ideal hope was we're going to try to groom Taysom. Somebody goes down. Somebody's going to be calling. That's the first call somebody's going to make as to New Orleans for Jameis Winston. So to me, that's the way to lay it out. But you never know. I mean, with a year of solid coaching, get rid of some of the turnover issues that he's had, and maybe he is the guy there. And they keep Taysom in the role that he's currently in, which is productive for a guy like him. That when they picked him up, I don't think they expected anything out of him to get this level of production they've gotten out of him. I think you've almost squeezed everything out of that stone, in my opinion.
Beer peripheral players, Jared Cook, Manny Sanders, Traquan Smith. Who's amongst that group the one you're most interested in?
Not really interested in any of them, to be honest, Dean. I think Jared Cook's getting overdrafted right now. There's a lot of tight ends I'd rather have there. Emmanuel Sanders out of that group would be the guy. I think Traquan, you can toss it aside now. It hasn't worked, and maybe he sees some kind of revelation here and we get anything out of him. But Sanders is intriguing, but like Gimino said, it's not the Saints from years ago that are throwing the ball 50 times and it's 400, 500 passing yards to go around. he'll see nice coverages because of Thomas, because of Kamara, because of Cook. But outside of that, I think it's a dart throw. The other name I like, Latavius Murray. I think he's going to be pretty involved in this offense more than people realize. And, to me, it's not just a handcuff situation. This is one of those Latavius Murray, Kareem Hunt. These guys will have standalone value. And if something were to happen to the guy in front of them, boom, now you're sitting on a league winner. So those are two guys that I've made a lot of picks on in these drafts. When you get to kind of that middle range, round 7, round 8, round 9, Hunt's going a lot earlier now, but Latavius is still sitting there. I think he's one of the better value options in that range of drafts.
Latavius Murray and Traquan Smith, both the pride at a UCF, the national champions. How about that?
Champs, right? They're winning it again this year, right, Dean?
Sure. All right.
I mean, just put up the banner.
My ring is on layaway as you speak. Gimino, your thoughts?
Look, I want to talk about Emmanuel Sanders for a second. I mean, this guy, he played every game last year. Dean, how many games did he play?
Wait, he played every game? Is that a trick question? He played every game. It is a trick
question. How many games did he play?
I assume. Oh, that's right. He played an extra game. He
played 17.
He played 17 games.
He still didn't get 1,000 yards. Like, this guy's not what he once was. I'll put it to you that way. I think this offense suits him pretty well, but I don't see this being like a game-changing wide receiver pick for you in those mid rounds. Could be wrong. This could be the exact kind of situation where Brees just, finds a liking to him and he becomes a guy who, outproduces expectations. I'm not banking on that, so I don't want to find myself with a lot of Emmanuel Sanders on the back end of his career. Lester Green himself, Jared Cook, I think that he was getting overdrafted and now he's starting to fall down the boards from what I'm seeing. Like I would probably be more okay with him than with your Emmanuel Sanders. And Traquan Smith, actually, for his diminished role in the offense, if you don't think Emmanuel Sanders is anything particularly special, he's going to be on the field a lot, and you're going to be able to take him with one of your last picks. I think you can do worse.
Jared Cook, bad as he wants to be. All right, Gimino, give me the player on the Saints you're most likely to end up on your lineup, and the one you're least likely to have.
It's Kamara for me, most likely. I think that at the top of the draft, I'm just fine taking him, hoping that he gets more receptions and or touchdowns in his bag in 2020. And the least likely is Drew Brees.
Yeah, I thought your guy was going to say Thomas, but your thoughts, your answer, same question.
Most likely, he already covered Kamara. I'll say Latavius Murray. I really like the value on him later in drafts. Least likely is definitely Michael Thomas. Love the player. I don't think he can replicate last season, and it just doesn't fit the builds that I've been going with so far this preseason.
All right, 2 teams down, 2 teams to go. Pittsburgh and Indianapolis on layaway. Little intermission here. I got this guy or that guy questions. Beer, we'll start with you. CEH versus Miles Sanders, and we are recording this. I just saw a note that apparently one of the beats said he's week to week, for whatever that's worth. I don't know. Just keep that in mind. Maybe he's not in the best shape of his life. I don't know.
So I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire here, regardless of the injury. I have him RB8 right now, Miles Sanders RB10. So even without the injury concern, I'll go Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You have to keep an eye on this Miles Sanders situation, though. Week to week, we're weeks away from the season. So, day to day would be like, okay, I can brush it off. Week to week is somewhat concerning with the lack of reps these guys have already had. And he's not new to this offense, not like he's a rookie coming in and needs an entire training camp, but still something that I'm going to monitor. And I don't see a huge movement down my rankings for Miles Sanders, but if things get iffy, certainly a move that I'm willing to make. But we know the upside is there. He's going to be the guy in this backfield. They're not going to split carries with him and Boston Scott, and Corey Clement suddenly looks good in training camp, and he's going to be the guy. So we can get rid of those concerns. Miles Sanders will be as close to a workhorse as you can get in the second group of running backs. But the possibilities for Clyde Edwards-Helaire with no Damian Williams, DeAndre Washington is your competition, who is intriguing later in drafts, no doubt. But Darwin Thompson, Darrell Williams, I mean, this is a running back room pretty void of talent, and they spent a high pick on this guy. Patrick Mahomes wants this guy. Andy Reid knows how to use guys like this. He will be heavily featured in the best offense in the league. So to me, it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's close, but give me Clyde, no doubt.
Beer, every domino falls both these guys' ways. Give me the upside. Like CEH can be a top what, and then Sanders can be a top what as far as running backs.
I mean, if they utilize Clyde in this Kansas City offense the way they should, he's right up there with McCaffrey, Barkley, guys like that. That's, to me, the ceiling is that high. Maybe not McCaffrey level, but certainly in the next group of Barkley, Zeke, guys like that. And I think Sanders has a similar upside. The offense won't be as good as Kansas City, but I think Philly can be a very productive offense, which would put him as a borderline top 5 running back. So the ceilings are massive for both of these guys. They're both going to be heavily involved in the passing game on good offenses. Sky's the limit for both of them. If this injury is nothing serious, of course.
Gimino, agree or disagree?
Better strength of schedule based on Vegas win totals, better quarterback. One of these guys is going to throw 50 touchdowns this year. One of them is not. One of these guys is going to throw for 5,000 yards. One of them is only going to throw for 4,500. Give me Clyde Edwards-Helaire here. I think that the workload's in favor of Sanders, but the overall median of great performances probably belongs to CEH.
All right, Gimino, I know we always talk about it. You guys always talk about weight on quarterback. A lot of times, of course, there's plenty of upside. You guys mentioned having quarterbacks at legs. There's 2 of them. L-Jax and Mahomes. Gimino, who give a preference amongst the 2?
Yeah, it's Mahomes. I just said I think the guy's going to throw for like 5,000 yards and 50. 50 is aggressive, but there's definitely going to be a big season coming for Patrick here. I don't think last year was anything close to what he's capable of. I mean, I guess it was close, but we saw what he can really do. Like, I think that he's just one of these Marino, Peyton Manning, massive numbers every single season type of guys, and I think that's what we're going to see again this year.
Beer?
It's Mahomes for me as well. I mean, they're 1-2 in my rankings. I think they're 1-2 in everyone's rankings in some order. And I love the running quarterback as much as the next guy, but when Patrick Mahomes is going to put numbers that are literally going to be off the charts, and I don't scoff when Gimino says 50 touchdowns. It's like, yeah, that can happen. We've already seen that. It's not that it's an unattainable number here. I just think that the sky's the limit for both of these guys. But give me the guy that's going to put the numbers up through the air in the better offense. There's going to be a ton of shootouts with this Kansas City team, and he can give you a little bit with his legs. It's not like he gives you nothing with his legs as well. So as much as I love Lamar Jackson, it's Mahomes 1 for me, Lamar Jackson 2.
It's interesting. The ADP stuff I have, it's really close. But when I'm looking at Mahomes at 27 and Jackson at 24, but it's interesting you guys both and also, are you guys actually drafting them? Because again, draft strategy is a thing. Are you finding yourselves getting either one of these quarterbacks in your team? Beer, you first.
I don't mind if they fall far enough. I'm not a second-round quarterback guy, but, if they're there at the 2-3 turn, the 3rd round even, and I can say to myself, okay, maybe I started with a Kelsey or a Tyreek Hill, then it's starting to go off in my head that Mahomes is still there. Let me build this stack. And it's mostly stack focus with Mahomes. Lamar, I worry less about it because there's not a lot of guys, Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, that you can really stack him with outside of some of the running backs. So I'm generally not a quarterback early guy, but if they fall far enough, I nail that position. I don't have to worry about it now till the very end of my draft. So I don't rule it out, but they really have to fall. And to me, it's usually mid to late 3rd, and sometimes they will fall that far. A lot of drafts, they go early, but if the value's there, don't be afraid to scoop it up, adjust your plan on the fly, and then just hammer home at running back and receiver moving forward, or get some of those stacking partners to go along with them.
Gimino, earlier today, a buddy of mine called me up and he said, hey, I got a keeper league. Help me out. And who keeper league? Come on. What year are we in? This is best ball. I'm like, I don't know. I go,
95, baby.
They have similar salaries. So I figured it would work for this conversation for best ball. He's like, hey, you like Galladay or you like Beckham? And I'm like, hey, I'm going to be on a show later today. A couple of really smart guys. I'll ask them. Don't take my opinion. I'll ask them. They know better than me. So help my buddy out, Gimino. Is he keeping Galladay or is he keeping Beckham?
I think you're going to keep Beckham this year. I really think that the Browns have done enough on their offensive line to give Baker the time to play better in his 3rd year. I think that, we came into last year with a lot of expectations for this team partly because of Beckham. And Beckham was probably one of the biggest victims of inaccurate throws of anyone in the league. You look at his on-target percentage, it just wasn't very good from Baker. And I think that we could see an improvement on that this season. I think that the kind of opponents that you're going to see Beckham going against for the majority of the season, we're going to be talking about him playing against the Bengals. There's going to be some soft games that are going to be coming into play here for Beckham, where I think we could see some really big weeks. So especially for best ball, it's Beckham for me. And it's not that I don't like Galladay, because I do like the Lions and I do like what that offense can do. I just think that as an individual upside player, I think Beckham's probably got the slight edge on Galladay just for the season.
Beer?
That's Beckham for me as well. I have Beckham wide receiver 10, Galladay wide receiver 13. So that's why we're doing this. You're going to have a lot of spots in your draft where you're debating guys that are very close. But I echo a lot of what Gimino said. Beckham, I expect to really bounce back. Was dealing with an injury last season. It's not an excuse, but the explosion just wasn't there that we're used to seeing with Odell Beckham. And you look at Kenny Galladay, and I put his numbers side by side with Marvin Jones, Dean, and there's not a huge discrepancy here. We talked about this when we talked about this team. I mean, Galladay beat him by 3 receptions. He had him on the yards and touchdowns, but Marvin Jones had 9 touchdowns to Galladay's 11. Galladay was carried by that 18 yards a catch. I don't think that's repeatable here. I think Marvin Jones is just a better value. So keeper league between the two, it's Beckham. But in these drafts, I'll pass on Galladay all day in the 3rd, wait till the 7th and grab Marvin Jones and be perfectly happy with it.
All right, last one. 3 tight ends that are being drafted similarly. Gronk Smash, Hunter Henry, Hayden Hurst, all the H's. Gimino, sort through these guys for us.
Well, considering I won't have any teams with Gronk or Hunter Henry, then it's definitely going to be Hayden Hurst for me.
Attaboy.
There's, maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. But, Gronk plays on a team with multiple tight ends and multiple pass catching options and a quarterback who's perfectly willing to distribute the football. Last we saw of Gronk, even after he was on getting skinny armed and singing on The Masked Singer, he was out there not exactly having the season of his life, and he was playing in an offense that was also spreading the ball around and really doing, Tom Brady-esque things out there. So I'm not really expecting a huge season from Gronk. I don't really think that we're going to ever see like the old Gronk come back the way that we once saw. And I think that's kind of what you're hoping for if you're taking him at his cost. And Hunter Henry, I just don't want to buy into the Chargers. So ultimately give me Hayden Hurst, replacing a bunch of lost targets there in Atlanta with a great quarterback in a team that's going to be absolutely awful on defense and have to throw it.
In a dome as well. You got to love that. Beer, it sounds like you agree. Let me just throw another name to the conversation. Higbee, does that make it interesting for you?
Nope. Dean, I moved Hayden Hurst up to tight end 6. That's how high I am on him, and I will take him over all of these guys. I will take him over Evan Ingram, Higbee. I'm very high on Hayden Hurst here, fitting into this offense. Gimino talked about it. The missing tight end targets are there. The offense should be good. The defense is going to be terrible. I just think he's a perfect fit for that role. In fact, I think he can be better than what Austin Hooper gave them last season. So yes, he has guys to fight with targets about, with Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. There's going to be plenty of targets to go around in this offense. Gronk, you're really counting on tight ends or touchdowns with this tight end spot there. And tight ends, sometimes that's what you're banking on when you get later on. I don't really want to count on those. I like Gronk. I would rather go with the guy with Hurst that's going to get volume and tight end and touchdown upside. And Henry, that whole offense, we've talked about it. Nothing has really changed for me. I like Eckler, pretty much out on the rest of the Chargers offense.
All right, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. In a vacuum, and I understand lineup construction and all that, Beer, but who would you prefer? James Conner, Juju Smith-Schuster, they're both being picked. Looks like we're seeing around 27 to 30 ADP as far as those two.
I'm really warming up to James Conner. It took me a while to get there. I've been on high on Juju this entire summer, and that really hasn't changed. Conner's the guy that it took a while, but I continue to move him up my rankings. So I will say Juju there, but the upside for Conner is huge. And we know health is a concern, but we can say that with almost every guy in the league. So at some point, you got to take some risks, and Conner's a guy that I'm willing to take that risk on. In fact, this is an offense I want to be very heavy on in these drafts. It's pretty easy to stack them. Even if you miss out on one of Juju or Conner, you can still grab Ben late. I know Deontay Johnson is continuing to climb up the rankings, but I still think there's value on him, a guy that was fantastic in his rookie season with terrible quarterback play. I mean, Dean, you were throwing the ball last season. This guy still put up numbers and charts out well against man, against zone. I mean, he played very well last season. So I like him. James Washington, another deep threat you can tack on. There's Ebron that you can throw on at the end as a tight end addition to your stack. So just a ton of different ways that you can go with this team. So very, very bullish here on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think this offense going to be a lot better than people realize. I know that defense is really good, but Connor could be a guy that you grab in the second, third round, and you're getting first-round value from him. If he can stay on the field, he has that level of upside. We've already seen it. I love this offense this season.
It goes without saying, Beer, that this is one of your favorite teams to stack.
Yes, for sure. And it again, some teams it costs you a lot to try to stack them. The Chiefs, you got all those guys jammed at the top. The Saints. This team, it's spread out a little more. You could even pull off a Connor in the second, Juju in the third, grab Ben late, and really capture the entire offense if you want. So I look for ease of stackability. They certainly provide you that in these drafts.
Gimino, are you on board with all these thoughts?
Oh yeah, definitely. Heath Miller once upon a time was a viable fantasy tight end every now and then, in Ben's offense. And now you give him a weapon like Ebron. We've seen the training camp reports. We've seen the velocity is back for Ben. So if this guy can still sling it like we've known him to in the past, the guy like Ebron could do a lot of damage for them in the passing game. We know that they're going to be good on defense, which again, I don't know if that means that's good for Connor, because we'll see a lot of a lot of running it down people's throat late in games, or if it's just in general good for the offense as a whole, because they'll have a lot of time of possession. But whatever the case may be, I do expect that this team will be, like Beer said, better than people think, and I do like the offense pretty much in its entirety. And Ben Roethlisberger has a lot to do with it. I just have a lot of faith in him, even though he's had some pretty terrible injuries over his career. He always seems to bounce back.
Sounds like both of you guys are on board with Ebron as a late-round flyer. I just want to throw some tight ends your way. Stop me again. Stop me when you'll take that person over Ebron. Jack Doyle, Ian Thomas, Chris Herndon, Blake Jarwin.
I think we could fight about Herndon, right? Like I think Herndon's a guy that's emerging in New York. We got Denzel Mims, the rookie. He's going to be out. So all this, suddenly we're down to Brashad Perriman and Jamison Crowder as his potential competition for targets, and we know that they like him out there. We know that they think he can do some things, and I believe it. He's got the rapport with Sam Darnold. I think it's pretty close there, and actually I think that Herndon might have more upside.
What about get them both? Just get those two guys as your tight ends.
Sure.
Beer, I guess you're on board with Ebron over all those guys and Herndon. I don't think you stopped me. I was going kind of fast. Goddard.
I mean, you literally went 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 in my rankings, Dean. So it's almost like you had them in front of you. But
I don't.
I prefer Jack Doyle slightly here. I just think he's going to be a big part of that offense. We know we're going to talk about Indy here in a minute, so I'll save that. Jarwin's a guy continue to move up. I mean, he's down in the pecking order, but what an offense to be in here, and a guy running the middle of the field. I think he's going to have some big opportunities as well. Ebron, I wonder what it's going to look like. Is Vance McDonald going to be involved? Is he only going to be a red zone weapon? Are they just going to unleash him fully? So I still have some concerns with him, but he's right in this group with all these guys. So Doyle, Jarwin ahead of him, Ian Thomas and Chris Herndon slightly behind him. So kind of a little mini tier there, but not a bad spot to land as your tight end too in some of these leagues with all these names right here.
All right, ADP I'm seeing here looks like 142 for Roethlisberger. Beer, you want this guy. How much are you willing to take him in the 12th, the 13th? But where do you reach to get him?
I mean, if I build a stack and I have it going, I'm gonna go and make sure I get him. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make is, you start the stack, you have the idea in your head, and you continue to wait and risk it. I don't want to risk it when you get to that point in the draft, because who are you getting instead of him that it was worth risking it? So if I have to jump around to make sure I finish the stack, I'm going to do that. So just don't make that mistake. I see that happen in a lot of drafts. If you're building the stack, be aggressive, go get your guy, pass on Denzel Mims at that point, and go get the quarterback you need to build your stack.
Let me ask this as a strategy question. Do you watch and see other people that are drafting and saying, oh, they're making a stack, well, they're making this stack, and you can kind of see like who they're going to pick next, and maybe you consider blocking them, or maybe you say, well, they're going to take that guy, so I know this guy's going to be available for me. Or am I just overthinking it?
If it's competing with something I'm doing, that they're trying to stack the same team, or there's certain ways, but for the most part, I'm keeping an eye on what everyone else is doing, but it doesn't overly affect what I'm doing. I have a plan going in. My plans are always going to get adjusted. You adapt to the draft, something that I just continue to hammer home here. Don't be I have to do this in this round. That's never going to work. So for the most part, I'm keeping an eye on it. I want to know what teams have a quarterback, what teams don't. That's more of the line of thinking that, okay, these guys all have quarterbacks. Maybe it's not, I don't have to rush into it, or these teams have 2-3 quarterbacks. So looking at it, yes, not worried about this guy stacking this, and I'm going to steal this guy away from him. Not much of that going on in my head when I'm drafting.
Same question, Gimino, as far as at what point do you grab Ben? You want Ben, you could take him earlier than ADP, but just to make sure you have him. And then just finish up the team. I give a thought on Deontay Johnson. I feel like we didn't touch on him. Worth mentioning for sure. He's around 78 to 80 as far as ADP on Underdog Fantasy. But clean up the Steelers for us.
Look, the bottom line is Roethlisberger's a guy that you're going to take. You're going to have most of the pieces of that stack earlier in the draft. Like you're going to have Connor or Juju somewhere at the beginning portion of that draft. And if you had to take Deontay Johnson in the mid rounds, who I think is a reasonable option, not someone that I'm going out of my way to make sure that I get on my teams this year, but someone that if he was the best available option, I'm fine going ahead and drafting him there. But usually if I'm taking him, I do then probably want to come back with Ebron and Roethlisberger, and hopefully I'm on the turn, right, where it makes it easy to finish a stack up if I'm on one of the two turns and both those guys are available. But yeah, I'm waiting till round 11, 12. I'm not going out of, I can make other stacks. I don't have to have the Steelers, but if I can make it naturally, I'm looking to do it.
All right, last team, the Indianapolis Colts. Beer, you wanted to talk about Jack Doyle. They're not as sexy as Pittsburgh as far as I can tell. Jonathan Taylor there. It'll be interesting to see what he does with Mac as well. T.Y. Hilton, it's all about health for him. You love him in the dome at home with all that speed. Getting a little up there as far as age. But the Colts, where do you want to go first here, Beer?
I'm going to defer to Gimino. He wanted to hit on the Colts. I want to give him the floor here, and I'll come up and clean up with my thoughts at the end.
Look, Dean, I had a sort of an epiphany this week as I was doing a lot of drafts. I was getting into the mid rounds of these various drafts that I'm involved in for best ball and these big tournaments, specifically in these big tournaments. And I'm noticing, a guy like T.Y. Hilton is falling every single draft. Jonathan Taylor is the only guy that costs anything in any of these drafts. And it's sort of, you don't really know exactly who the RB1 is. I mean, for all we know, it's still Marlon Mack who's going to end up with a slight majority of touches in the offense, albeit Taylor probably has the more valuable role with pass catching. But as I look at the upside for a guy like Marlon Mack, and I look at the upside for T.Y. Hilton, and look at how cheap every single piece in this offense is outside of those couple of guys. I mean, you're talking about drafting Doyle in the double-digit rounds. You're talking about drafting a guy like Michael Pittman who's jumping off the page in camp. You're talking about Paris Campbell being absolutely, last round type material, or like very, very, very late round material. And Phillip Rivers, of course, everyone's written him off. And I think that's the main reason that all these guys are sort of falling down the board. Meanwhile, they have an improving defense and one of the best offensive lines in the league. And I start to say, where can I exploit the marketplace and say that if I want to build a stack in way more teams than is my fair share, that I can get these guys a lot very often, still has the big upside to help me win both in the regular season and when you look at the strength of schedule in the playoffs. You look at the Colts have one of the easiest schedules by far in the entire league, and that in the playoffs they're going to get let me pull this up, Dean. I'm pretty sure they get Houston twice in the playoffs. It's just like, it's a very, very, very favorable schedule that we're talking about here. We're talking about in week 13 the Colts for Houston, and then week 15. So you're really, really talking about a very, very high upside situation that doesn't have a lot of costs associated with it. And I think that I've very recently come accustomed to the idea that I should probably be making more Colt stacks and really trying to exploit the big gap between where they could go and where they're being priced.
Beer, I want you to retort in just a second, but I'm curious. When you say stack, people interpret that in different ways. Define a stack. Is it like a quarterback receiver? Is that a stack? You need two pieces as far as two receivers, a running back receiver, and a quarterback. What would you call a stack?
Two, maybe three, outside the quarterback. So like what I'm looking for is like when it becomes the playoff weeks, right? When you're talking about, you have to win your week every single week. Once you get to the playoffs, that's it. You have to be reaching the pinnacle. So I want to have a lot of correlation in my lineup just in case those teams that I have those stacks of have big weeks so that I can get multiple touchdowns tied to my fantasy football team. So that's where when you talk about having Rivers plus Hilton plus Doyle and I've got that against the Texans who stink on defense, then I'm starting to get excited. And that's what, you don't really want to try to get too far ahead of yourself trying to guess which defenses are going to be good and bad for the season. We get surprised every single year in that regard. But when you look at the odds of Houston having a good defense, it's not very good. And I look at the odds of Indianapolis having a serviceable to potentially pretty good offense, I think it's actually pretty good, a lot better than they're being priced. So that's where I'm saying this particular stack, having multiple correlated pieces, could work out for you well in best balls.
Beer, retort?
I like this team in certain spots. I go back to Phillip Rivers being a concern to me. I mean, last season did not look great. And this is a team built on offensive line running the ball. So Jonathan Taylor, I think a lot of people think he's being overdrafted. I think there's big time upside there with him, and even where Marlon Mack goes. So I'm more apt to take the running backs. I don't know that I want them both, but at certain points in the draft, Jonathan Taylor, the upside alone is worth hitting that button. And Mack, if he's going to be involved and you're getting him in, say, the 9th, 10th round, nobody really wants to draft him. I think there's value in that as well. And then the tight ends are intriguing as well. Doyle, I mentioned, we know they're going to utilize 2 tight end sets. We know Rivers loves to throw to the tight end. We know Frank Reich likes to utilize the tight end in his offense. So if Doyle can stay on the field, he could be one of the top target guys on this team. I mean, T.Y. Hilton, if he's out there, is the guy. I think Pittman may take some time, but he's going to be involved. Paris Campbell is intriguing. So there's a lot of guys that I'm intrigued by. I just worry about Rivers tying that stack together and feeling good about that. But at cost, it's basically free. I hate the term free, but that's what it is. It's very, very discounted. And that's the kind of team that if I can stack them cheap later in drafts, or I can have multiple stacks of teams. I think that's one thing people don't really factor into these best ball championships is if I can build 2 or 3 different stacks, I'm all about it. And this is a team you could do whatever you're doing early with Kansas City or Pittsburgh or New Orleans and build this team later on in your draft and have a few stacks going on. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't like the term free either because there's a value to that roster spot, obviously. You only have so many roster spots. They're not free. But, yeah, I understand what people are saying when they say that. Beer, when you consider where you have to get these guys, we're seeing ADP right now in Underdog Fantasy. Taylor around 36, Hilton around 56, Mack at 86, Rivers at 182, the receiver, Pittman at 150, Campbell in the 150s as well. You said Doyle you like 162. Is he your favorite when you consider where you have to draft him?
I like taking a shot on Jonathan Taylor, and that may be a hot take. I'm hearing a lot of he's being overdrafted, avoid him, but I want to swing for the fences in these drafts, Dean. And if I miss, okay, maybe it is a 50-50 committee all season, but they traded up for this guy. They have invested heavily in their offensive line. They clearly don't believe in Marlon Mack. I mean, he doesn't have the A.J. Dillon quads, but this guy's an athletic freak. So if I'm going to swing for the fences on anybody here with the Colts, I'm going to go early, and I'm going to do it with Jonathan Taylor. From overdrafting him, I don't care because I think the sky's the limit here and a guy that can outproduce that, even with people seeing him overvalued. So T.Y. Hilton, I worry about a little bit. I like the value on Doyle. I don't even mind Trey Burton as a last-round tight end play in this offense. And again, Paris Campbell's intriguing to me. I just don't know how much passing volume there's going to be for all these guys to get there. So it all circles back to this offensive line, this athlete that I know can run the football with the best of them. Jonathan Taylor, the guy that I really want to swing for the fences with.
Same question, Gimino. And yeah, if you're building a stack, like the way I'm seeing this, you can get a Colt stack, like from picks 14 on. Like you can build yourself a Colt stack if that's what you want. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, that's my point pretty much, is that I don't need the Colts to win my regular season portion of the best ball league. Mm-hmm. If I'm taking them, I'm really wanting them to finish with that sort of softest schedule towards the end of the season. That's really where I'm looking for them to come through for me, and it's not coming at cost. So I can make the rest of my roster strong with more expensive picks and guys, even like T.Y. Hilton, who's not being, he's not being drafted where he once was. And I think that you still have a lot of upside there with him, especially if Rivers isn't as washed as guys are making him out to be. I know Beer's not too high on him. I don't blame him one bit for not having the confidence that we once had in Phillip Rivers, but I just see that there are lights at the end of the tunnel for him to have big enough games in those weeks where he could pay off, paying that very, very, very cheap late round tag.
I'm sure it's not true, and I'm sure he plays a lot more than I think in my head, but T.Y. Hilton is it's an evergreen tweet that he's questionable this week. Like he almost always does play, I think, and you probably know that more so than I do. But he just always feels like a little bit dinged, a little bit beat up, like most vulnerable to leave the game with an injury, but whatever. All right. Like you said, you're getting him around on Underdog Fantasy around 59 as far as the ADP. So it's definitely tumbled a bit, and it's kind of baked into the cost. Your final thought on the Colts, and then we got to finish strong. This is the best ball hot take show, Gimino. Give me a hot take on anything we've talked about.
As far as, we talked about drafting guys like Michael Thomas as they had huge stats last season. They were really guys that are really gained the adoration of the public because of how often they were winning their daily fantasy contests with him. But this is not daily fantasy. We're talking about, constructing a roster for the balance of the season. And I think the hot take of hot takes this year is that Michael Thomas rosters have no chance to win these best ball tournaments, and that you will not see those particular teams winning the last round of the big tournaments. You won't see Michael Thomas in those rosters.
Yeah, and it's not his fault. Like it's not his fault.
No, he's gonna have a big year.
Yeah, like, just to be clear, it's like it's a weird way of saying. I know exactly what you're saying, but people might misinterpret that. If you like what you're hearing, if you're interested in best ball, check out Underdog Fantasy. You can get involved for as little as $3. There's tournaments up to $100 as well as far as buy-in. Again, we've talked about earlier in the show the signature Best Ball Mania tournament, $25 million. That'd be a lot. $25, $1 million as far as total prize pool, $200K up top. If you only want to buy in for $5, there's another tournament for you. $5 to buy in, get yourself $20K at top as far as a $100K total prize pool. Check it out, UnderdogFantasy.com. The app is also available in iOS and Android. Beer, see his hot take and raise them.
Dean, I'm going to rapid fire a bunch of hot takes here. So you ready for all this?
Fire away.
Hayden Hurst, top 5 tight end. Anthony Miller, top 20 wide receiver. Jonathan Taylor, top 10 running back at the end of the year. And the Pittsburgh Steelers stack will win somebody a whole hell of a lot of money this season, Dean. Those are the hot takes for me.
Gimino, Mortal Kombat, like when they finish them, Beer just finished you, Gimino. I know your take was good, but he gave you 3 or 4 or 5, and they just rapid fire. And I appreciate the effort, but we're giving this round to Beer. Thanks for playing, though, Gimino.
I'll accept my inflamed body from the scorpion mask right there. You can't win them all.
You win the home version of this game and some steak knives. Thank you for playing. Again, this was the Best Ball Hot Take Show presented by Underdog Fantasy. That was Gimino. That was Beer. This was football. I was Dean. Thanks for watching. We're out of here. Holler.